Superior Pond, superior care. Your backyard retreat beyond compare. Minnesota's finest at your call. Your pond stays perfect all year long.
Picture this, your Minnesota backyard. Maybe it looks a bit like Debbie and Matthew's place over in Savage, you know?
Oh.
You've got that lovely pond, your own little oasis. But, well, maybe it's time for a refresh, a rebuild even.
Right. Things get old, need updating.
Exactly. And the first thought, the really tempting one, is, well, can you just keep using the old stuff? You know, save some money, maybe skip some hassle.
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
That's exactly what we're digging into today. We've been looking at some expert insights, particularly from Superior Ponds, to really understand what happens when you try to mix your old pond gear with a new vision for your backyard.
Right, and that instinct to reuse, it's completely understandable. I mean, you look at the pond, maybe the pump still makes noise or the skimmer looks intact.
Yeah, seems fine on the surface.
Exactly, and the idea of, immediate savings, that's definitely appealing.
Yeah.
So the core of what we're exploring here is whether hanging on to that old equipment during a rebuild is like a savvy financial move,
Sure.
or potentially just setting yourself up for bigger headaches down the line.
Mm.
Really need to look beyond just that initial cost saving and get into the potential snags.
Okay. So let's dive into that initial appeal first. Why would you even think about reusing old pond equipment? And let's be honest, the number one thing is the money, right?
Oh, absolutely. Cash.
It just seems logical. If the pump's still humming along, the skimmer isn't obviously cracked, why not just keep them? Save some bucks.
Yeah, and the folks at Superior Ponds, they get this. They acknowledge right away that, reusing can save money up front. And for a big project, that could feel pretty significant.
Definitely. When you're looking at the overall cost, anything you can shave off looks good.
Totally. But like we said, it's vital to look beyond that initial price tag.
Huh.
What else makes people lean towards reusing?
Well, another one, and this is something a lot of people care about, myself included, is the environmental side of things.
Ah, right, the green angle.
Yeah. If something still seems to have life left in it, the thought of just, tossing it in a landfill, it doesn't feel great.
No, it doesn't.
So reusing can feel like the responsible, the eco-conscious thing to do. You're keeping stuff out of the dump.
That desire to reduce waste, be more sustainable, it's definitely a valid point for many homeowners. Giving existing equipment a longer life cycle, it just makes intuitive sense from that perspective.
And thinking about all the energy and resources that go into making brand new equipment.
Yeah,
Reusing seems like, almost a duty sometimes.
I can see that viewpoint.
And then there's the sentimental thing. Superior Ponds mentioned this, and it's maybe not the first thing you think of.
Right, the emotional connection.
Exactly. Sometimes a part of your pond, it has a story. Maybe the person who lived there before built that little waterfall feature by hand, or, maybe a family member gave you the pump years ago.
Uh-huh. There's history there.
There's an emotional tie, and you might feel a bit, reluctant to just rip it out and replace it without thinking twice.
That connection we have to our gardens, our homes, the features in them is completely understandable, very human. However, and this is the big however, when we start to weigh these very valid, very human reasons for wanting to reuse against the potential for future problems,
That's where it gets complicated.
that's where the equation really starts to shift, yeah.
Okay, so we get why you might be tempted. Money, environment, sentiment. Got it. Now let's flip the coin. The potential pitfalls. This is where Superior Ponds really lays out why hanging on to that old gear could cause, more trouble than it's worth. And the first thing they bring up is pretty fundamental. Like, equipment just wears out. Things get old.
Exactly. Even if your old pump sounds okay or that skimmer looks solid from the outside, you have to consider its history. How many seasons has it actually been running?
Right. What's it been through?
Aquascape Inc.'s general guideline, which suggests maybe a 3 to 5 year lifespan for many pond pumps. Depends on usage, maintenance, all that.
3 to 5 years. That's maybe not as long as people think.
It might not be. Now, they do add the caveat that a pump that was, correctly sized and installed right from the start can last longer if it's well maintained.
And that correctly sized bit, sounds like a huge factor. Superior Ponds made a really important point there, didn't they? That a lot of the DIY ponds they end up servicing.
Yeah.
They often find the pumps were undersized right from the beginning.
Oh, that's super common. Happens all the time.
So even if your old pump is technically still working, it might never have been powerful enough for your pond in the first place, let alone maybe a bigger or redesigned one you're planning now.
Precisely. It's like trying to run a marathon with worn-out shoes. You might finish, but it won't be pretty.
Ah, good analogy.
An undersized, older pump, it likely just won't provide the proper circulation needed for a healthy, rebuilt pond. And what does that lead to?
Let me guess. Murky water. Algae.
You got it. Superior Ponds is clear, stagnant areas, sludge buildup, poor water quality overall. Pretty much the exact opposite of the low-maintenance, clear ecosystem you're aiming for with a rebuild.
So you're fighting an uphill battle from day one.
Pretty much. As they mentioned, skimping on getting the right size pump initially, it almost always comes back to bite you. Cloudy water, maybe the pump fails prematurely because it's overworked.
Right.
They even used Debbie and Matthew's situation, remember, noting their existing weak pump probably wouldn't have had the oomph, the power, for a new waterfall feature.
Yeah, that really paints a picture. Compromised performance right out of the gate. It's like putting, I don't know, old spark plugs in a new engine.
Exactly. It might technically run, but you're definitely not getting the performance or reliability you want.
And speaking of things not quite working together, let's talk compatibility. That's another big red flag. Superior ponds raised, right? Mixing old and new.
Oh, absolutely. This is a key difference between, say, older piecemeal pond setups and the more integrated designs we see today, especially these ecosystem ponds.
What do you mean by ecosystem ponds exactly?
Well, their designs, all the components, the skimmer, the biofilter, the pump, the plumbing, they all work together synergistically to keep the water clean and balanced naturally.
Ah, okay, like a little self-contained system.
Exactly. So when you try to connect an old piece of equipment, say your existing skimmer, to a brand new pond liner and maybe modern plumbing, you can run into all sorts of issues.
Leaks, I bet.
Leaks are a big one, yeah. And inconsistent water flow. The systems just weren't necessarily designed to mesh perfectly.
And it's not just about getting the pipes to physically fit, is it?
Yeah.
Superior Ponds mentioned something from the plumbing officials, IAPMO.
Yes. The International Association of Plumbing and Mechanical Officials. They warn about the risks of improper connections in outdoor water systems generally.
What kind of risks?
Things like joints failing prematurely, inconsistent water pressure messing things up, even causing extra wear and tear on both the old and the new parts, especially if the older components aren't rated for the demands of the new system.
That sounds, yeah, like a recipe for leaks and bigger problems down the road. Not what you want after a rebuild.
Not at all. And Superior Ponds use that example again, with Debbie and Matthew's old skimmer potentially needing all sorts of adapters and, workarounds to connect to new plumbing.
Creating weak points.
Exactly. As they rightly point out, every single connection point in a pond is a potential leak waiting to happen. When you start mixing old and new, different materials, different connection types, you're just multiplying those vulnerable spots.
And here in Minnesota, with our winters, that freeze-thaw cycle must be brutal on those connections.
Oh, it's huge. That constant expansion and contraction puts immense stress on everything underground. Those makeshift connections, they're often the first things to fail when the ground starts moving.
Right. These aren't stable indoor pipes we're talking about. They're out in the elements dealing with temperature swings.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want those connections solid.
You really do.
Okay, so potential equipment failure, compatibility nightmares. What else? Warranties. That's something homeowners might totally overlook.
It's a really important factor and easily missed. When you install a completely new pond system using all new core components, it almost always comes with some kind of warranty.
From the manufacturer or the installer?
Often both, covering different aspects.
Yeah.
Superior Ponds, for example, they highlighted that they offer lifetime warranties on new water features if they're built with all new core parts and enrolled in their maintenance plan.
Wow, lifetime, but only if it's all new stuff.
Right. And even standard warranties from most reputable installers usually depend on the whole core system, pump, filter, skimmer, liner, plumbing being new. That way, they can actually stand behind its performance.
So by trying to save maybe a few $100 up front by keeping an old pump or filter,
Yeah.
you could actually be throwing away potentially thousands of dollars in warranty protection on all the brand new parts of your pond, the liner, the plumbing.
That's exactly the risk. It seems like a really poor trade-off when you think about it long-term.
It really does.
Like Superior Ponds pointed out, if Debbie and Matthew had insisted on reusing their old gear, they would almost certainly forfeited any warranty protection on the new liner, the new plumbing, maybe new waterfall kit.
And it's not because the installer is being difficult, right?
No, not at all. It's just that they can't reasonably guarantee the reliability of a whole system when it includes older parts with an unknown history, unknown wear and tear.
Yeah.
How can they warranty something they didn't install and don't know the condition of?
Makes sense. You can't vouch for the unknown.
Exactly.
And that lack of a warranty, it leads right into the next potential headache, doesn't it? The increased risk of unplanned repairs.
Bingo. Nobody wants their newly rebuilt pond to be a constant source of breakdowns and service calls.
Definitely not. The whole point is usually to get away from problems, create something low maintenance, peaceful.
Absolutely. And this isn't just like a hypothetical worry. Superior Ponds shared a really telling statistic from Pond Trade Magazine.
Oh, yeah. What was that?
A 2023 survey indicated that over 60%, 0% of service calls in the Midwest involved pond systems where equipment had been reused or repurposed during a rebuild.
Wow, over 60%.
Yeah.
That really hits home. It strongly suggests reusing old stuff significantly increases your chances of problems later.
It certainly points that way. And you can imagine trying to diagnose what's wrong in a system that's a mix of old and new tech.
Must be a nightmare for the service guys.
It can be incredibly complex. Is it the old pump failing? Is it an incompatibility issue causing the new filter to malfunction? Is there a hidden leak at an old connection point?
You're chasing ghosts.
It can feel like that. Super time-consuming. Superior Ponds emphasizes that often just replacing all the critical interconnected equipment during the rebuild can actually prevent these recurring, frustrating headaches.
Saving you money and stress in the long run.
Absolutely. And they shared that story, remember, about what could have happened to Debbie and Matthew. Frequent mid-season failures, pond losing water, pump cutting out.
Yeah, requiring expensive emergency calls. Exactly. Disruptive service calls to figure out problems in their supposedly new pond. And that anecdote about the client with 4 separate service calls in one season. All traced back to a failing reused pump.
Ouch. That wipes out any initial savings pretty fast.
Completely. Plus all the stress and disappointment. That's no fun.
No kidding. You go through all the effort of a rebuild, picturing this beautiful, easy care retreat, and instead, you're constantly dealing with breakdowns and repair bills.
Ugh. Yeah. And it's not just about whether it works or not, is it? There's the whole aesthetic side, the enjoyment factor.
True. How it looks and sounds.
Absolutely. Older pumps, they might just be louder, or they might not circulate water as effectively, so your waterfall is more of a trickle than a cascade.
Less impressive.
Less impressive, less soothing maybe. Older lighting might be less energy efficient, could flicker. Things that just detract from that tranquil vibe you're going for.
Little things that add up to diminish the experience. They really can. They mentioned a client whose reused pump was failing result. A barely there waterfall and constant algae blooms because the water wasn't moving enough.
So it impacts the look and the health of the pond.
Exactly. It highlights those long-term downsides, both aesthetically and functionally.
So you could end up with a pond that doesn't look or sound as good as you hoped. It's potentially causing more headaches, costing more in repairs, maybe even using more energy.
Yeah.
It really does start to sound like that classic penny-wise, pound-foolish situation.
That's a very good way to put it.
Yeah.
You might see that small saving right at the start, but you could be setting yourself up for ongoing costs, frustration, and ultimately just a less satisfying pond experience overall.
Okay. And this brings us to something you mentioned earlier, which Superior Ponds really emphasize the foundation.
Yes, the liner and the plumbing, the absolute bedrock of the system.
They made that great analogy. It's like the foundation of your house. If that's compromised, anything you build on top is at risk.
Perfect analogy. You wouldn't build a beautiful new addition on a cracked, sinking foundation, would you?
Absolutely not.
Trying to rebuild your pond on top of an old, potentially brittle or leaky liner or maybe cracked, aging plumbing underground.
It's just asking for trouble.
And replacing the liner, that's not a small job.
No way. Superior Ponds rightly points out, replacing the liner isn't a minor repair. It's essentially a full system overhaul. You're taking everything apart.
Right.
And they've seen it happen where seemingly okay reused components actually put stress on an older liner or aging pipes, causing hidden leaks.
Hidden leaks, meaning you might not even know for a while.
Exactly. You just notice the water level keeps dropping, your water bill goes up. Things DIRs might not immediately connect to that reused pump or skimmer.
Especially since so much of it is buried.
Precisely. So much of an aging system is underground, out of sight. You might not realize how degraded that old plumbing actually is until it fails completely. It's like you're only seeing the tip of the iceberg with the visible equipment. But there's this whole hidden network underneath that could undermine the whole project.
Well said.
So, okay, after hearing all these potential problems, all these risks, is there ever a time when reusing old pond stuff actually makes sense? Are there any exceptions?
Well, Superior Ponds does offer a few, let's say, specific caveats. It's not a blanket never reuse anything.
Okay.
They suggest that if you have, say, a relatively new pump, maybe only a year or two old, and it's known to be energy efficient and was sized correctly, it might be a candidate for reuse, but only after a really thorough inspection and cleaning by a pro to make sure it's genuinely in good working order.
So newer, high quality, professionally checked.
Pretty much. Similarly, some purely decorative things, maybe some nice rocks you want to keep, a specific fountain feature that's separate from the main system, maybe newer LED lights. Those could potentially be reused if they're in good shape and fit the new design.
Okay, so it sounds like the potential for reuse is really limited, mostly to things that aren't like mission critical for the pond's function and water quality.
Generally, yes. And components that haven't endured years and years of constant operation in Minnesota weather cycles.
Right.
But they also raise that crucial point again. The very fact you're thinking about a major rebuild. It often means something in the existing system has already failed or is clearly on its last legs.
Good point. Why fix it if it ain't broke? But if you're rebuilding, something probably is broke or close to it.
Exactly. And ultimately, their goal, like most reputable pond builders, isn't just to patch things up. It's to create that low-maintenance, balanced ecosystem pond that you can enjoy for years without constant hassle.
And throwing old, potentially unreliable parts into that new system kind of undermines that whole goal.
It really does. It goes against that core objective of long-term reliability and enjoyment.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So let's try and bring it all together. For our listener, maybe someone in Minnesota, just like Debbie and Matthew, thinking about rebuilding their pond. What's the main takeaway message here about reusing their old equipment?
I think the fundamental message is, look, that initial urge to reuse, it's totally normal and understandable, especially with costs in mind.
Yeah.
But it demands a really careful, really realistic look at the bigger picture. And your long-term goals for the pond, you absolutely have to weigh those potential short-term savings against the very real risks.
Risks like?
Yeah.
Recap them for us.
Future operational problems, breakdowns, compatibility issues leading to leaks or poor performance, voided warranties on all your new expensive stuff, and maybe just ending up with a pond that doesn't look or function as beautifully as you'd hoped.
Right. So it really comes down to what you prioritize, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
If saving money right now is the absolute top priority, and maybe you're okay with doing more DIY tinkering and troubleshooting later, then perhaps, maybe, selectively reusing a few newer non-critical bits could be discussed with a professional. But it sounds like a big maybe.
It's definitely a cautious approach. Because on the other hand, if your main goal is creating that truly low-maintenance, tranquil backyard haven.
Which is probably what most people want from a pond rebuild.
Exactly. If you want something that will last for years, provide consistent enjoyment, peace of mind, then investing in a complete system rebuild using new, fully compatible, quality components is very often the smarter choice.
And potentially more cost-effective in the long run, even if the upfront cost is higher.
Absolutely. You're investing in the long-term health, beauty, and enjoyment of your pond. Less stress, fewer repair bills down the line.
Okay. So let's leave our listeners with a final thought then, something to really mull over.
Okay.
Think deeply about what your pond really means to you. Is it just, another feature in the yard? Or is it more? Is it that special space for relaxing, for connecting with nature, maybe where you have your morning coffee or unwind in the evening?
Yeah, what role does it play?
Exactly. And when you're making these decisions about the rebuild, ask yourself honestly, will those potential upfront savings from reusing old gear truly outweigh the risk of future headaches, a potentially compromised experience, maybe even bigger costs later?
It's about weighing short-term gain against long-term peace of mind.
What kind of peace of mind are you really investing in when you decide how to tackle this pond rebuild? That's the question.
That's a crucial question, absolutely. And if you find yourself still, unsure about the best way forward for your specific pond,
which is understandable. Every situation is different.
Totally. Then getting expert advice, talking to experienced professionals like the team at Superior Ponds or another local expert, that's invaluable.
Get someone knowledgeable to look at your actual equipment.
Yes. Get a professional assessment of what you have, a clear explanation of the pros and cons of reuse versus a full rebuild in your situation. That clarity can help you make the right decision and ensure you get years of enjoyment from your backyard pond.
Superior care, your backyard retreat beyond compare. Minnesota's finest.